Hello everybody, welcome to the latest episode of Games Up podcast, brought to you by World Geekly News. This week we will be talking about our predictions for 2019. There won't be a news section and there won't be a topic of the week. It will be a slightly different show with all our predictions in it. And we'll get to that in a few seconds. But firstly, hello, I'm one of your hosts, Cameron McCulloch-Keeble, and he's the other one of your hosts, Lewis Crawford.
Hello, hello.
How are you doing?
Mightily fine.
Excellent.
On this wonderful day.
So, the way this is going to work is we are going to start with general predictions, which will sort of go over the general gaming industry, big predictions for trends in 2019. Then we'll move on to Xbox, then PlayStation, then Nintendo, respectively. And finally, we'll have an other section, just in case there's stuff that doesn't fit into any of those four things, but that we think needs to be addressed. Lewis, are you ready?
Yes.
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to blow your socks off?
Yeah, I'll go first.
All right, then.
So, as we know, we're coming to the end of this generation. Things are sort of maybe winding down a little bit. So we're expecting to see the consoles probably within the next 2 years, this year or next. And I think it's likely that we see them revealed this year and kind of coming out in the next. So with that in mind, I think the Xbox will be at E3. The Xbox Next X, or the whatever name they decide to give it. And then we see Sony reveal something at maybe TGS or Game PlayStation Experience. And then we see them, as I say, release the year after. And then obviously all the games that, I don't know if Microsoft has them, but I know that Sony has obviously those ones coming out at kind of in the end of this generation. I imagine loads of those are going to end up being cross-gen. So yeah.
Yeah, I am 100% in agreement with you. My first prediction is basically the same. We see both new consoles from Xbox and PlayStation this year. Neither of them are released this year as well. And yeah, I agree with you that some things might be cross-gen that we don't know about yet. If I had to sort of put a target on the head of one of them for Xbox, I'd say Crackdown might be realistically the one that works best cross-gen, but that depends on how it's received and all that jazz. And yeah, I think 2020 makes a lot more sense for the year of their release, especially with... we've got quite a busy year for it winding down, so 2020 makes sense as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Hit me with your number two.
Yeah, my number two. Okay, so I think... So we're just talking about kind of big hitters and big misses of the year. There's still the rumour that Cyberpunk, or the expectation that Cyberpunk 2077 is coming out this year. I think it's going to be a strong choice for Game of the Year. While there's a lot of things coming out this year, I think nothing's quite as big as that. So that's, that prediction.
Yep, I can see what you mean. I think there might be some stuff that's not announced yet that could give it a little bit of a run for its money. But yeah, I think it's a fair shout. It's a fair shout. My second prediction for the year is that the Epic Store is going to gain major traction over the course of the year, and by the end of 2019 we will consider it the biggest competitor to Steam. I think they're going to do quite a lot of work in sort of putting their name out with second-party indies and third-party indie games, so that there's a lot of competition that Steam didn't expect by the end of the year.
Yeah, I can see that happening, and I think Epic's definitely getting some kind of traction around it. Especially with some of their practices. So I'm very interested to see where that goes. But I'm also interested whether they've got, I guess, longevity. If you know what I mean? It's like at the moment, Epic has the advantage of having the Fortnite money coming in. Mm. I do wonder what it'll be like when they don't have that. If there is a point when they don't have that.
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, they will always have the...
Yeah, of course.
The engine bubble, so they'll always have Unreal. On the other hand, yeah, you're right. The Fortnite bubble will burst at some point. We don't know when it will burst. It could be a much more sustained burst, like the COD bubble. But it will burst, and it's a matter of what have they put in place to kind of keep that store safe for when it does.
Yeah, totally. Well, in that spirit, I think Steam, my final prediction, Steam will kind of make some moves to start countering the Epic Store. Something very similar, I guess, some like free games or something that counters what they're doing at the moment, as well as maybe redressing that balance for the indie developers. Because I think a lot of the place where Epic's getting traction is on those developer splits. So I think Steam's going to kind of be forced to do something about it soon, especially if your prediction ends up being true.
And to be honest, I hope you're right. I think Steam still has a lot of good stuff going for it, but they've been kind of practiced out, as it were. And to see them redress some of their practices and fix that would be, just be good for everyone. My final prediction this time around is, I think, a bit of a big one. I think a bit of a bold one, but it's that Hideo Kojima will announce that Death Stranding is his final game as a video game director. Now, to put a bit of context around this, what I mean is that he will say that he is not going to direct any more video games, but he will continue to write them and he will continue to produce them. He will act as an executive producer in his studio and use his studio to give his platform to younger up-and-coming developers, maybe out of Japan with more Western ideals, or Western ideas in their games, I should say. So he kind of uses this to launch his studio and then uses his studio as a base for new talent going forward.
When you said it, I thought crazy that he would stop. But on the other hand, I can see him kind of putting the time in and helping other directors get their kind of shot in game. I could definitely see that happening, actually. And it's definitely like Kojima's the right guy that would do that. So
he's just had such a tumultuous few years, and I get the feeling that he's probably more well ingratiated with the gaming community than he ever has been in a while, in inverted commas. So I get the feeling that people like Jeff Keighley, the guys at the Sony studio whose engine he's using, I forget the name, Guerrilla, the guys at Guerrilla, journalists who have been able to get more time with him and understand that perspective, and even some of the people who consider themselves competitors to Konami and look at their business practices as malicious. I can imagine that those people have a lot more respect and a lot more kind of behind Kojima now than they have done in a long time. So I get the feeling that he will kind of see the value in that more than he ever has. Not that he ever hasn't, but I get the feeling he might be more inspired by it than before. And the best way to keep the gaming industry healthy, I suppose, is to build something for the future of it. So I think we'll see him do something like that. Yeah,
I think so. And I think I don't know if you ever follow his Twitter, but he has definitely become like a superstar of the gaming world, in that frequently he's getting tours around other people's studios and everyone loves him. It's crazy. Crazy stuff.
I actually don't follow his Twitter. I should do that.
He went to Remedy recently.
Oh, cool.
That was really cool. And it's genuinely he's become like a rock star. It's kind of crazy.
Cool.
But yeah.
So those were the general topics. Those were what we think the industry will look like in 2019. Now we'll move on to the three main hardware producers. We're not going to do a PC one because it's kind of difficult to do PC exclusively. You'd have to talk about the different manufacturers of hardware and now all the different software publishers. So that's a little bit harder to do. That fits more into the general one. We'll start with Xbox. So how's about I'll start around this time and we'll switch each time?
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Okay, so my first prediction is that with no competition in terms of PlayStation at E3 this year, Xbox will go all out on their E3 show and treat it as their new hardware reveal. They will show off their new system as well as a thread of core games that will be coming to it in the next 2 years.
Okay, all right. See, I have I guess a similar encounter prediction. And I don't know, I just think that there's never really been an Xbox console reveal that was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I think even the Scorpio probably comes close. The Xbox One X was probably came close to being perfect,
Yeah,
but most of the time when it's a new console, they have maybe spent a lot of money on certain features like Connect or certain ideas, and it's not gone over too well. Well, they talked about TV for ages. There's some interesting times. I rewatched that recently. It's definitely a trip, but regardless, I think that maybe not enough is shown. Maybe they talk too much about some integrated feature, or you can watch TV if you shout TV really loud, and sports, something like that. I think we do see some games though, which is an improvement, especially with kind of the influence and the way they're going. So it's probably going to be better than some of the previous ones have been. But I still think we don't really see too much. I'm really down on Xbox.
No, you down on Xbox?
Never.
My second prediction is that running through the core thread of these games at E3 are quite a number of things we expected to see. So another Forza game. I think, as an aside here, I think it will be the third branch of Forza that's been talked about for a while. So we always expect Forza Motorsport and Forza Horizon, and they kind of alternate. But I expect Motorsport to show off the new console in 2020. So I expect 2019 to be the third branch that they've been supposedly working on for a while. I imagine it'll be something kind of arcadey, maybe more like Burnout or something along those lines. But the prediction is, I think the biggest surprise of this lineup will be a once again exclusive new Splinter Cell game.
Okay, all right. Oh,
I mean, the voice actor has basically suggested it. We know that I think it was Jade Raymond that was working on it before she left. I might have that wrong, but we know that somebody has been confirmed to be working on it before they left a few years ago. We know that they remodeled Sam Fisher to appear in one of the Tom Clancy games recently, so a lot of signs point to them doing something with him. And Splinter Cell's one of those things that added a lot to the Xbox lineup that they've been lacking, and it feels weird to say that they've been lacking a kind of stealthy shooter because they don't really do much else, but they don't quite have the core pillar that Splinter Cell gave them, and I think Phil Spencer knows that.
okay.
Hit me with your two.
Yeah, so I've kind of changed my mind on this since I first wrote it down.
Okay.
But I think we do see the next Fable game. And actually, I think it's going to look really good. I think it's going to sound terrible, but I think I just think that there's been a lot of improvement in the storytelling world in video games, and as bad as it is to say, a lot of that's not from Microsoft's side. And I think Phil kind of has mentioned this before and has wanted to counter it. And if there's a great place to counter it and really just go all out on the kind of storytelling, interactive world, all this kind of stuff, it's in the Fable game.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's actually something that I do think has a good chance.
Finally, my third of three predictions is I think this year we will see Xbox buy another major studio. When I first wrote this down, and we've had a little chat about these predictions, I kind of came up with a list of ideas, but I'm not going to nail any one of these in sand particularly, because that would absolutely screw my chance of getting any point on this prediction. But I think we see somebody on the level of IO Interactive, or Insomniac, or Ready at Dawn, somebody like that. If they hadn't gone open third party, I would have said Remedy would be the biggest obvious choice, but obviously that's unlikely to happen now with Control. So I'm thinking somebody of that ilk.
Okay. That could be really interesting. I think they're pretty well stacked at Xbox at the moment. If everything turns out well and it's not another one of these kind of take 5 and kill 4. then we've got very interesting years coming up, I think.
They're pretty happy to splash the cash at the minute.
Yeah. Hmm, cool. So I think that one of the kind of hidden features about the console, and maybe something that's kind of not overly surprising because it was going to be there in the Kinect initial days, and because at the end of the day, the Xbox One had the Kinect, right? And nowadays people have like the Alexa devices, and it's not that different from the idea that you could just have something that's always listening.
Yeah.
But back at the reveal of the Xbox One, it was pretty negative.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're going to see Microsoft kind of pull that again in a way, but now it's kind of a smart home hub. So the actual Xbox, it's like the Kinect, is still there, but maybe tiny now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's linked in with some other devices. I'm not really sure what, but that's like Microsoft start releasing their own sort of smart home devices or smart devices that can integrate with your Xbox Hub. And I could really see them doing this. It's not something, I guess, great in terms of the gaming sense, but this is kind of what I'm on about like those extra features that, maybe they missed the mark. They don't talk about games, but they talk about how it's a smart home hub or something like that. I can see it so badly. So yeah, that's me.
I 100% agree with you. Even if it's not like a talked about thing, I think it like a lot of that is done by the Xbox One already, in that there's voice integration, there's Cortana, there's if you own a Kinect, you can still use it to navigate around and do those kind of commands. And I think it is probably the next step. I wonder if maybe it will integrate with stuff more so than it does at the minute. Maybe if there's an app for Alexa devices or something like that that allows you to control and turn on, because there has been that integration in some other stuff. But it makes total sense for this to be like the next step of the stuff the Xbox is secretly doing, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's 2 of 5 done. Now we move on to PlayStation. So it's your turn to go first, Mr. Crawford.
So much in the same way as the other predictions, the PS5 is revealed. It's called the PS5. And mostly there's a large focus on the games we already know about. Some of the things that are in that crossfire, the cross-gen kind of spot. Final Fantasy Remake's going to be on PS5, isn't it, anyway? Like, that game was revealed at the start of this gen. If it ever comes out. Ever. But things like that, like there's a few things that we know have been existing for a while now. And then a few things that were just a bit like, what was the Sony game that was revealed? Ninjas.
Oh, Ghost of Tsushima.
Yes, Ghost of Tsushima. Things like that are kind of in the middle, I think, are things that we could see being kind of talked about at the PS5 and just having not a comparison, but like, look how good it looks here.
Mm-hmm.
Look how much more powerful it is, because that's kind of always been... it's always kind of been part of the way that Sony have advertised. That's why I guess the Xbox One X is a bit of a hit to them. Because Sony's always done, like, whenever they've done their reveals, it's always done, like, we're the most powerful console by slightly, usually. So I can see them doing something like that. And then we just see, I don't know, like, everything that's rumored in the past 5 years all at once. Just because I want to see it happen.
I was going to say, I think that might be optimistic, but I can see where the optimism is coming from.
I'm not even saying Sony games, just everything. Like,
Splinter Cells okay.
on PS, like, because I think there's been so many rumors about things we knew about. It's definitely going to happen. This is definitely going to be revealed. For the past 4 years, none of that stuff has come out. It's like, what's it? Borderlands. Definitely, it's going to happen. It's going to be any second. Like, nope. And it's the same with Splinter Cell and some of the other things. So, I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's tough because we've been hearing about some of those things for a very long time, and it kind of makes me concerned if we've been hearing about them and they've always planned to be next gen. Like, oof, that's quite a timeline, but also that's probably realistic. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to counter you a little bit on one specific point in my first prediction, and that is that due to tighter day one integration of the PlayStation VR, I imagine there will be at least one SKU, if not the whole thing, has a PSVR headset out of the box. Due to this, I don't think the next PlayStation will be called PS5. I think it will be called something, maybe PSV, because like maybe PSVR, like capital V, little R, or something along those lines. But I don't think it will be called the PS5.
See, it's kind of crazy, this one, because although I do think that it would be very much a PS5, just because I don't think they're going to kind of go away from that. At the same time, PSV would be a good way of still being PS5 and adopting that, like, GTA 5, GTA V thing, So I could kind of see it. And the integration with VR I could also see, because that's something that's been going very well for Sony.
Yeah.
And I could see it happening.
I think the integration in VR is almost certain, in that it's something that is truly unique that they're doing in the console space at the minute, and they will keep hold of that as best they can. I think integrating it into the next console makes a lot more sense, because having that box built out the gate to be ready for it makes a lot more sense. That was one of the smaller criticisms leveled at the headset when it came out originally. And I think a new headset to make use of the power of the console makes a lot of sense. So that's a lot of ducks lined up to not be all one package for me. Like, it seems a lot of things to message out at once, but to all be slightly sporadically separate. And I can see branding people getting a hands on it and wanting to change it for the better. I also think we're seeing a little bit more of a what's the word? We're seeing a little bit more of a Sony from a few years ago. Nowhere near to the extent we did, but I think we're seeing them being a little bit more pompous, and I can see them kind of taking a big bet on it a little bit to their detriment, maybe. I don't know.
Okay. I think we finally see the PS5, and it has backwards compatibility with the PS4. Still not the PS3, because apparently the cell processor on the PS3 makes it basically impossible to, at least emulate nicely. So yeah, I don't think we see anything before then, just because it's maybe a bit too far.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I do think that they're going to keep their stance on the cross-platform for most games.
Okay.
I know that there are some games now that do actually have the proper, you can play on anything. But I just don't think they're going to do it for everything, because I think they are going to stick to that line of, it's like someone said it, like the best place to play games or something along those lines. And I don't think they're going to go away from that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense. Xbox have done a really good job of messaging backwards compatibility as a thing everyone kind of expects in a console now, just like it used to be when consoles started. And yeah, I think they probably... I wonder if the backwards compatibility will come in the form of something streaming rather than more traditional disc-in-play game. But yeah, I think that makes total sense.
I think it will do come in some sort of streaming form, actually, because I think it's becoming more and more accepted, which means it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Than allowing because I know that some of the consoles in the past that have had backwards compatibility with discs is like you have to make two consoles, and depending on which disc you insert, it changes which console runs the thing. I think that's how the PS3 worked. It actually had a PS2 inside.
Yeah.
And that's kind of crazy. I think they're not going to be wanting to do anything like that.
No. And because of the hardware of the PlayStation 3, emulating it is quite difficult, as you say, because of the cell processor. So they couldn't do something like... Xbox One to 360. So it is going to be interesting to see how they handle that situation. Okay, my second one is that with the PlayStation V, I'll call it, coming out in the next year at the time of its reveal, the PlayStation Network is going to be made free on PS4, but PlayStation Plus will remain paid for. So you can play all the multiplayer games you want for free, but if you want all the free games each month, you have to go to PS Plus. This will allow them to do two things, and it's my thinking for it. Firstly, it will allow them to put VR games on PS Plus, which will be a big push for the next system. It will also help them do a kind of end-of-the-generation push for sales, a big marketing thing of you have to pay to play on Switch and Xbox. You don't hear, imagine if you could now have a Fortnite and a COD and a Battlefield and a this, that, the other account, all ready for the next gen in a year's time.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So my one's kind of changed since last week.
Oh, okay.
And this is mostly because, basically my prediction
So-
is that...
Before we go any further, we should clarify the reason you say that is because we've tried to record this last week and it absolutely crashed out.
Yeah.
It was a bad week for tech stuff. Anyway, yeah, sorry, peek behind the curtain there. On you go.
So my prediction is that Days Gone is actually going to be a surprise. I say hit, but not like a game of the year super game, but maybe much better than people have been expecting it to be, or does a bigger hit than people have been expecting. Mostly because recently, quite a good trailer for it released that I think we revitalized a little bit of the hype, because there was none. And I think, although Days Gone has been quite put down a bit, I think it's going to be a surprise when it actually comes out, and it's going to probably do a lot better than people expect. Like a dark horse. It's still kind of like I think it's not going to be like the 10 out of 10, the 9 out of 10, but it's going to be like a solid 8,
Yeah.
That's
I
kind of
get
where
what
I
you
see
mean.
it.
No, I
But a
get
lot
what
of people have been expecting it to be a lot worse, I think.
It's not going to be an Order 1886. It's going to be like a Knack 2.
Sure.
Solid, not an absolute garbage fire, but not set the world on fire either.
I'd say more like a Far Cry.
Oh, okay. All right.
None of those games have done amazingly. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's going to be something in
Okay.
that kind of region. Not like an 8.5 out of 10, something like that.
Okay, fair enough. My one is more of a kind of businessy meta thing, but I think at the reveal of the PSV, we will see somebody take the kind of main figurehead of the console, maybe Andrew House, maybe Mark Cerny, and all of this will lead up to, or have been led up to, by Sean Layden stepping down as his current position in Sony. He is roughly around the age, I think, that Jack Tretton was when he stepped down from that position in the company. And actually him stepping down led to quite a refresh in Andrew House and the tone of voice. Not Andrew House, sorry. Sean Layden and the tone of voice. And I think I could kind of see the same thing happening again. Layden has had an incredible generation as the head of Sony. Like, if you ever wanted to go out with a bang, now is the time to do it.
Yeah, I could see that. Especially kind of, as you say, going out with a bang and being like the guy who kind of made it the success it's been this generation.
Yeah,
I could see
absolutely.
that.
Okay, now it gets a little bit difficult because we come now to Nintendo, whom Lewis has basically zero opinions on. So you've got 2 predictions, I've got 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to go first with your 2 in that case, and I'll go all the way through my 3?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So my first prediction is the kind of one of the. Okay, so it takes a bit of explaining, but Nintendo are well known for releasing consoles, and then releasing kind of a few big hitters throughout the kind of generation, the lifespan of those consoles. And it's quite negative, but I think I don't really think Nintendo have changed in their kind of style. if you like. And so I still think that we're going to have just not much happen this year. Kind of no big hitters, and no one really spends too much time talking about Nintendo. Which I know sounds terrible, but it's something that I think I've seen with most of the Nintendo consoles. And there's a lot of excitement around them kind of changing. And I think they have been doing kind of the right step with more third-party stuff and more stuff going on, but I still think it's not quite the big hitters, I don't think they've got much kind of coming. So yeah, some things get ported to it. Do you want to talk on that?
I think what I'll do is talk on it in my predictions, because I think you're wrong, basically. But I think you might be right in certain cases. So, my big 3 predictions are this. For the first time in 5 years, Nintendo will have no Japanese competition at E3, so we will see them return to E3 and do a full press conference. There will be no Sony, but as a result of this, there will probably also not be Square Enix. Most of their major surprise games would have released by the time of E3, and without Sony, who they usually do their marketing deals with, Square won't be there either, meaning that if you're looking at E3 for any kind of Japanese focus, you'll get maybe a couple of token JRPGs on stage from Xbox, but the main focus would be Nintendo, and I think they'd take the bull by the horns with that and do something with it. As a result of this, prediction number 2, at that conference, or maybe beforehand, a second Nintendo Switch is announced. It is the same form factor, but with a much larger screen and smaller bezels. Most importantly, though, it keeps its plastic back so that it can include wireless charging, which would be a big combat to the criticisms that can be levelled at the Switch as it currently stands. And my big prediction for the year for their software is that Pokemon 8 and Animal Crossing at least are released this year. I wouldn't be surprised if they had another first-party thing up their sleeves, but one way or another, Pokemon 8 and Animal Crossing, the big tentpole games, come out this year. And by the end of the year, the Switch sees versions of both PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds and, due to Bungie and Activision's recent split, a version of Destiny.
Destiny?
Yes.
That's interesting.
So,
I mean, other things, I'm in 2 places with, but Destiny?
Yeah, so I've put much more meticulous thought than I'm proud of into this, but so we know that one of the reasons supposedly Bungie split with Activision, or one of the reasons that they've been considering it, is that they've been working with a Chinese firm on a new IP. They've teased and talked about it a couple of times, and if you're in China, there is no console space there. It's the majority of the market is browser games and mobile games. So it's possible it's one of those or a PC game, but it will have, I imagine, some kind of integration with those platforms. If they wanted to get a brand name and ingratiate themselves more into the Chinese market before that releases, putting Destiny on some form of mobile platform would be really, really good for them. And I feel if they bother to do that, they'll bother to put it on the Switch.
Okay, all right.
PlayerUnknown's already has a mobile client on basically every phone, and it's like 3 times more popular than the game on anything else. It keeps up with Fortnite on mobile, like user-wise. So I can imagine them making the time to port it to Switch, and I think it would do very well for them.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
So yeah, that's...
Yeah. All these things always depend on, I guess... Well, I mean, I guess if they're on phones, then yeah, it shouldn't be impossible.
Yeah, I think if they weren't on phones, the scale of both of those games would be... I mean, PlayerUnknown's isn't as much about scale, because it's just that it's not incredibly well made, but part of it is the scale of what it does, and the scale of both of those games wouldn't work on the Switch. But if they can translate to mobile, and I feel like they can... Destiny would have to be a pared down version of itself. Obviously, it couldn't be exactly Destiny 2. It would need to be cut sections of it. But I feel like something could work. Also, like, it's worth considering that we know that Destiny 3 is basically now going to have to happen, because the profits of those games have a lot more riding on their shoulders now. And a really good way for Bungie to make people want to pick Destiny back up again will be like, hey, in a couple of years there'll be a brand new all singing, all dancing Destiny game, but why don't you take it on the go with you?
Yeah, okay. Oh, I don't know. If it does all these things, I'll end up with the Switch.
Oh, really?
Yeah. See what happens.
I gotta be honest. It's a pretty good console.
Yeah.
So those are all of our specific predictions done. Now we've just got kind of extra stuff on the side. If anyone has any, Lewis, do you have any?
Maybe just once. I want to see Final Fantasy VII remake.
Do you want to
That's all I
see
really
it or
want.
do you want to play it?
Play it.
Okay.
But also see it because the only thing that we've seen of it, this game that's supposedly being made just all the time, forever, is like a mod for Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah.
Because that was they had like kind of a gameplay reveal, but in actuality it was a mod on Final Fantasy 15. So like, just see anything from it.
Okay.
Would be good. Let's buy it.
I have a couple on the side. So my big general one is I think the year is going to act as a swan song for generation. I think we're in the 8th generation. I never remember. For the 8th generation, I think a number of big games are going to be announced this year that we don't know about and will release. I think obviously Cyberpunk is going to be a big one, but I hope we might see Borderlands, as we've spoken about, and I hope we might see the next Batman game as well. I think those are a lot closer than we think. I also really, really hope, because it's probably the game I'm the most excited about for a long while, we see and maybe play Beyond Good and Evil this year. It might be a little further out than I'm thinking, and maybe I need to temper my expectations a bit, but I could kind of see that.
That's interesting. Sorry, to ruin your flow slightly. Isn't that one of the ones that a long time ago we agreed we're never seeing it?
Yeah, but then we have because it's only we've only actually known about it for like a year and a half. It was 2016's E3 that 2017's E3. Oh, we're old. That showed it off. And at the time, it was like, there's no way that game is anywhere near, like, because they showed the demo of Scale, where you were a person, a group of people, a large city of people, a city in a bigger continent, then continent to country, country to globe, globe to universe. And it was like, yeah, there's no way that game is ever coming out on the current hardware. But then last E3, it was there. They were playing it. It was probably a vertical slice, but like, I don't know. If I were being extremely optimistic, I'd love it to come out this year. It probably doesn't, but it would be lovely to see it.
I think there is some footage of like some alpha stuff for it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so.
Don't do this to me.
But so I've got a video from 2019 that's pre-alpha footage. So I'm not sure.
2019.
Yeah. So well, it says 2019. It's like from December, but
okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Pre-alpha.
pre-alpha's not bad. Like,
No. And it looks like a game. So
the funny thing about like dev terms is alpha and beta are a lot closer to release than you'd think. Like, they sound very, very far away, but they're not, as far as I understand, as an ignorant person who's never worked in the industry. Yeah, I don't know. My second prediction is that I think some things are going to come out. Actually, not some things. Fuck it, I'll be specific. I think Shenmue 3 is going to absolutely bomb.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't see any way in which that game comes out and stays true to the original, but works. I see that bombing. But I think we see a big year for Respawn this year. I think we probably see their Star Wars game, play their Star Wars game, and see some kind of reveal for Titanfall 3. We know each of those games is in development fairly far along, and we know that Star Wars is probably talked about very heavily this year. But in response to that, I think it's a big year for Respawn, but I think we start to see EA lose the Star Wars license. I think it'll be parceled out to other developers. We've already seen a card game being developed for it that's not under EA's house rules. So I think we'll start to see it being parceled out and taken away to other people.
Okay.
And then my Game of the Year prediction is that Cyberpunk is very good, very high up there, but it sees some competition, some sleeper competition. If Beyond Good and Evil comes out, that could give it a big run for its money. Probably not, though. I think I really want to temper my expectations because realistically, it probably doesn't come out this year, but I'm very excited for it. I think Sekiro could actually make a big impact. I've changed my mind on that. When we tried to record this the first time, I said I was skeptical of it because I think it's going to be a big change from what From Software does. But I've spent some time over this week looking at it and researching into it, and actually I think it could address what they've struggled with within Dark Souls, and give them an opportunity to kind of advance as a developer. And I'm very excited for it after this week. So
Okay.
yeah, it's gonna be a year.
Yeah, I still don't know about Beyond Good and Evil. I think for a game that you've seen very little of, you're surprisingly excited for it. But I just don't think there's much to say about it at the moment. I don't think anyone really knows what it looks like enough.
I think the thing that excites me about it the most is that I can't think of a game I've seen in recent years that captures that feeling of sci-fi and space and scale so organically and well. There's a lot of games that feel like, so I'll give you an example. I'm trudging, just tortuously dragging myself through Assassin's Creed Odyssey at the minute. I finished the main family story and the epilogue and the chapters, and now I'm kind of doing all the other sci-fi stuff around it. And it's a big game. It's a very big game. And it's one of those games where if you were playing it authentically, you would see a marker point on the other side of the map, and you'd walk, then you'd get on your horse, then you'd get on your ship, then you'd traverse the seas, then you'd walk, then get on your horse and get to the other side. And that would be a thoroughly lovely, wonderful experience for everyone involved, and you'd feel better for doing it. But I'm not getting that vibe. Whereas Beyond Good and Evil I haven't played, and I already want to go from a position to a marker on the other side of the galaxy using my crazy spaceship and this, that, the other, and the world is so exciting about it. And that, I think, is a good sign of a game being interesting.
Sure, but really, I don't even know the expression. It's a really common expression. Oh well, bearer of bad news. Let's go with that. You know who makes both these games?
Yeah, but then but also they made Far Cry.
Yeah, true.
That's one of the fascinating when you put it like that. But that's one of the fascinating things about Ubisoft as a publisher, is that on the one hand they can have a game that is totally not Assassin's Creed, and then frankly the Ubisoft formula they're well known for has been set by Assassin's Creed, but they are quite able to shift away from it. I don't think they get enough respect for actually some of the more interesting and diverse stuff they put out. Like, if you look at them over the course of this year, they've put out The Division, they've put out Wildlands, they've put out Assassin's Creed, they've put out Steep, they've put out some indie stuff, the Just Dance games. They are genuinely one of the most diverse publishers, I think, that we have. You know, especially if you stack them up to somebody next to, like, EA, who are traditionally a shooter house, or, you know, Square, who are traditionally more RPG focused. Ubisoft do have that ability to be quite diverse, and I see it in Beyond Good and Evil. I'm very excited for that game.
Fair enough.
Cool. And yeah, Cyberpunk looks incredible. Absolutely incredible. So that's also going to be a really exciting game to get our hands on this year, I hope.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that one.
And I think we do. Okay, I think that wraps us up nicely. Those are our predictions for 2019. Would you agree?
Yes.
Awesome. Now, it's at this point we have to stop the podcast a little bit and ask you for a favour. Surprise, Games Up Podcast is now on Spotify, but we need some people to help get us a little bit more discoverable, because Spotify's algorithm's a bit weird. So if you've listened to this, please go and follow us on Spotify. The link's on our Facebook page, just because we're struggling to be found a little bit at the minute, and that would help a great deal. Thank you very much. And that ends the podcast. If you like what you heard here, you can follow us along this journey, and you can do so by subscribing or following whatever platform you are on. We are Games Upcast on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, Facebook, and now Spotify. And you can like us so that we maybe get a few more people to see us. Subscribe or follow on whatever platform you're on, and we will see you next week. Thank you very much for joining us, and until then, the game's up.